Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce. I'm joined by two co-hosts this evening. Back from the IL, even though he's playing injured, we have the Juice Man himself, and we have Mr. Nick Hudson. Gentlemen, first off, happy Monday. Second of all, happy Cubs off day. And third off, how are you guys?
Go ahead, Nick.
In my personal life, I'm doing phenomenal, doing fantastic. In my baseball life, I'm depressed watching good and fun and exciting teams and just wondering why we can't have that.
I respect that. I respect that fully. Juice?
Shit all the way around. Juicy juice diarrhea.
Yeah,
So a little backstory, IL. Juice had a little kidney stone. May still have a kidney stone. So I was laid up watching bad baseball with a kidney stone. Yeah.
It's been rough in these parts, literally, for Juice as things persist. Well, we're happy to have you back, sir, and it's good to see you again, Mr. Hudson. But we got some things to talk about. We had a week off with the holiday no show from us over the course of the last 7, well, now technically I guess 8 days. But the Cubs split these games, which is weird because Tyler and I sat here a week ago and said, oh, it would be a shock if they win 2 of these games, maybe 3. And they did. They won 3. They win the series against the Angels over the weekend, taking 2 out of 3 in that one. Lose the series to the Phillies, a pair of 2-run losses in the first 2, but then they kicked the shit out of them on the 4th of July behind a 2-home run performance, 2 3-run home run performance, I should say, from one Mr. Ian Happ. And gentlemen, I do want to talk about some of the things that occurred here. Obviously, the 2-home run game from Happ is a great story, but I think Justin Steele's complete game probably was the highlight of this week, going 9 innings against the Angels in that game on Friday, giving up just the 1 run, only allowed 3 total base runners the whole day. I mean, he was dialed in. 94 pitches is all it took for him to get through 9 against the Los Angeles Angels. I mean, guys, I was talking about this with a few people over the course of the last few days. Obviously, all-star stuff has been announced. Shota Imanaga is the Cubs' lone all-star representative. I think if he doesn't miss a month of the season, Justin Steele's right there with him. And Friday's performance would have been the final audition, per se, for the all-star game because he's really been that good. And he's actually lowered his ERA under 3. I mean, are you guys happy in the sense of just like Friday felt like, hey, Justin showed he's still here. He's still the guy. He's still the ace of this team.
Sure. I mean, it's hard. It's so hard to be optimistic and be happy about great performances when each and every night is the same as the last. But a guy who's been on this show, a guy who we openly root heavily for, yeah, that was his first win since September of last year. That's ridiculous. Like, I mean, get that kid some run support, man. Like, it just shows, like, how just awful the team around some of these starters is. I mean, he's pitched as one of the best starters in the league over the course of his, like, last 7-8 starts. And he has, like, 1 win to show for it. And the Cubs don't win the starts that he pitches in either. It's one of those situations too where you're getting great performances out of him, and it's for what? It seems so wasted and so wasteful that I was so happy that the fact that they allowed him to go out there in the 9th and not even mess around with the clown show that's out there in the bullpen. And I know they're trying. Don't get me wrong. Like, these guys are not just sitting on their hands and not trying to perfect their craft, but it's one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic for next year, because I don't think we will ever – well, let's just say I don't think we will ever – I don't hope we ever see a bullpen built this way ever again. I hope that this is the final straw in the – I call it, a bullpen case study that we've had, which is essentially a lot of guys who throw 93, 94 with – some splitter action out there. But I mean, let's be honest. The Cubs just don't have that guy who comes in out of the pen that just scares you. like, oh man, this guy's coming. No, they're all comfortable at bats. And it's nice to see that at least when the starters are out there, it's an uncomfortable at bat. You're seeing Schott out there, you're seeing Justin Steele, you're seeing, Jameson Tyone for a lot of it, Javier Assad prior to his injury pitching well. Hayden Wisniewski the other night has a nice start as well. I know that's been something too that he's been plagued with, back to the bullpen and starting, and seems like they throw him all around and ask him to be a Swiss Army knife when he's never really done it. So I feel for him, but yeah, Justin, tip the cap, man. I agree with your sentiment, Ron. I think if he wasn't hurt, there's a good chance that, they're looking at him as another notch to the NL All-Star team. But in some ways too, not making it for him may be beneficial. There's some, there's been a lot of talk within the broadcast too. And I try to read between the tea leaves on that. I do think maybe he's pitching still with, less than 100% health as well. I mean, there's been some balls that have been laid down bunt-wise that he's looked very awkward going to get, or, choppers, off the plate, a couple pop flies he kind of gingerly went after. But he's a gamer. He's just somebody who gets out there and takes the ball and competes. And I sat watching with a kidney stone the Milwaukee series and watched him run in there and scream at everybody. And I felt so in sync with that, because over the course of like the last month and a half, I've been wanting to do that to this team. But it's nice to see, he's kind of been that leader. He's been that ace. He's been that guy that you can definitely rely on. And it's just nice to see him get a win, because he's deserved one like 7 or 8 times over the course of the season.
100%. Nick, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree that if he didn't miss a month, he'd be another all-star, because he's been phenomenal. When he came back from the injury, the home run ball was kind of something he struggled with, but that's really gone away. He's really tightened stuff up, and that performance was just like you said. He took the leadership role of yelling at the guys and getting pumped up like that, and then he proved it that he is the leader through that complete game. And if you're not going to give me a win, I'm going to just go out there and do it myself. And I liked it, but I agree with Juice's sentiment. I glanced over and I was like, yeah, good for Justin, but I'm still so pissed off because it's wasted opportunities. There's been a lot of great starting pitching performances, and it's been wasted. And it's sad because a lot of times last year we were begging for the starters to just go a little longer or keep things a little bit down because the offense was doing well, and now it ceases to exist sometimes. So it's very frustrating. So I agree with you, Juice.
Yeah, and I think what Friday told me when it comes to Steele, just to add on, is like the first doubt, or the first thing that came into my head through the whole kind of montage of the complete game, and him talking about, how what it means to pitch at Wrigley and things like that. Like, I sat back, and the first thing that came into my head was a headline of actually something that I want to write. And I'm going to also protrude some of that out here in words as well. And it's no doubt Steele's for real. And I mean that in multiple facets. I don't just mean that as the pitcher on the mound and what he does in terms of executing pitches and things like that. But he's the real deal in the sense of what you look for on every successful organization in baseball, right? The New York Yankees have a Garrett Cole. The Detroit Tigers for years had Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, and those guys are obviously still in the league doing their thing in other places now. You have that dude that really just commands the respect of not only his teammates, but also people around the league. And I actually really like this comment here from Matthew, and I don't think it's far off. That Steele reminds, I think, a lot of people of John Lester, because he has that bulldog mentality. He's not afraid. And I think this year more than ever, like last year, I think for Justin was truly like, hey, this is my first year as a bona fide starter. Like I'm actually breaking into the league. I think a lot of people looked at that rotation and didn't see him as the leader of the rotation because Stroman was still there and you still had Kyle Hendricks and all things like that. And I think even now, though, with this year, even with still having Kyle Hendricks there, obviously having Shota come in to replace him, Justin Steele is still very much the ace, as Matthew said a little bit earlier, right? Shota is awesome. Steele is the ace of the team. But Steele's also a leader on this team. And I would make the argument that right now, when we all sit here and we look at the Dansby Swansons of the world, we sit here and look at the Ian Happs and the Nico Horners and these guys that might be struggling, and we look to all these position players and say, where's the leader on this team? That guy's the leader on this team right now. He is the heart and soul and truly the heartbeat right now of this Cubs team. And ever since he told them to wake the fuck up, this team has been playing better baseball. Not perfect baseball, but better baseball. And I think it's so refreshing as a fan because you both alluded to it, right? You guys identified with Steele laying into them, telling them to wake up, as I think every Cubs fan has so far. And I think that just means even more to people when he goes out there then and throws a complete game at Wrigley on a Friday, right? I mean, it truly aligns that he is for real. If I'm Jed Hoyer, because one of the smartest things I can do this offseason is walk up to Justin Steele and say, what's your number? What is it going to take me for you to buy out your arbiers, not even have to get through the mess? Because let's be honest, if he continues at the pace he's on, he's due a substantial raise regardless. You know, he's making $4 million this year. I would argue he's going to probably make at least 9, if not more, after this year of arbitration. Hey, what can we get you at? We'll even backload it. So it's still like you going to free agency and getting paid. But let's get you to be the true face of this franchise right now. Because again, and Juice, I know you might tease us with this a little bit later, and this might be one of your talking points as well, but the Cubs have a lot of money coming off the books in the next 2 years. Right? Dansby Swanson's
next year, if you look at it.
Even next year. So Dansby Swanson's the only guy that you can look to the foreseeable future and say he's going to be here no matter what because of the contract and because of the no trade clause and everything like that. Make Justin Steele that other guy. And I think a lot of fans would be on board with that. He's still relatively young. He's only, 27? I think he's going to turn 28 this year. Or actually, I think he's going to turn, 28 in like 2 weeks? Because his birthday is always right at the All-Star break. So, I mean, you can get him through his age 35 season when he's probably still going to be throwing at least well, right? He doesn't throw for crazy velocity. He hovers in the low to mid-90s, and he relies on movement. Lock that guy up right now because I truly believe it that he is for real in every facet of what you could ask for as an ace on this team. And I think just with the way these 6 games went over the course of 4th of July week, that by far to me was the highlight of the week because of what he went out and did against the Angels on Friday. Built off that momentum from Thursday that they gained, getting that big 10-2 win over the Phillies to avoid a sweep. And then coming out there and saying, hey, we're going to set the tone for this Angels series, or we're going to try and go out there and win a damn series. And he took care of business legitimately almost by himself to ensure that they got out of there with a W on Friday.
I love the idea of doing that, Ron. Like going and asking for what his number is. There's just so much to improve on this baseball team that it's unfortunate that I think that will be the last thing in Jed's mind going into this offseason. It'll be let's ride those R beers for another one at least but you're right. Like you can't Steele also too. Like I love the John Lester comp, but I also love the fact of like over the course of this last couple of years, you've really just learned who he is. Like he has the Steele show, through Barstool Sports. He has been more vocal. I feel like, he's done. It just seems like I see him more often taking interviews, dropping on the radio shows, things like that, just opening up his personality. And I think that one thing he's kind of taught us over the course of this year is he's just a real guy. Mm-hmm. He's at the end of the day, he's not, none of it's fake. None of it's, made up for the media or anything like that. Cause there are guys who are out there who are 100% different in front of the camera than they are, in front of their teammates or family or in the organization in general. And yeah, bring him back. I hope that's the case. Get him locked up for a long time. This team has so much to figure out. And honestly too, I mean, I don't want to jump into the next conversation because I am going to tease a little bit and talk why I'm a little bit optimistic about next year. But there's there's just so much to figure out in such a short amount of time that it's really going to open this up to some mistakes that even could set you back even further. Like, I'm optimistic because I do think that there's a route, but I also think that the route that they have to take to make this thing successful is going to be a very difficult one, and it's going to be plagued with opportunities for them to really trip over themselves and push this thing even further back.
Yeah. No, very fair. And again, like you said, I'm fully expecting them to ride his RBers, unfortunately. But I think, they have certainly identified an ace for the foreseeable future as things roll. Gentlemen, let's steer this conversation here a little bit. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the series. I think we can all agree it was a frustrating series against the Phillies. It was cool to see them win against the Angels. I think we could all sit back and say it was kind of frustrating, especially with Saturday's game. But they come away, they split 6 games, they go 3-3 over the 6 at Wrigley, getting 2 against the Angels and winning that series, obviously losing the series against the Phillies. But let's get into some of the greater topics here, because we could sit here and talk about, the strong pitching from each of these games. You alluded to Hayden Wesneski, Juice, a little bit earlier, how good he was on Sunday for the Cubs in that win over the Angels. We can sit here and dive into the little nitpicks of the games, but obviously July becomes a big month in baseball because of the trade deadline and obviously because of the All-Star break. And that's where things start to kind of trickle in. And that is what really is capturing everybody's attention right now. So I am going to steer the conversation, Juice, just like you said. And the topic, we'll call it here, is what's the verdict? Because just like in the comments section here, and I'm going to be happy to share some of these as we tee up our conversation here, we've got a lot of people kind of saying 2 different things, really, in the comment section here. We've got Scott, who led off the show with the comments here. He said, 18 games left until the deadline. He says the Cubs have to win 12 of them, or they are selling 3 out of the 5. He lists Belly, Morel, Nico, Happ, and Seiya Suzuki. In addition to that, Hank Rodriguez says sell, sell, sell. Everyone with 1 or 2 years on their contracts is for sale. Where Matthew says they need to be buyers. He says the farm is stocked. Even if they don't make the playoffs, they need to buy and lock up whoever it is that they buy. That's an interesting route potentially. It's going to be interesting because even Brandon says, greetings, gents, the Cubs need something to ignite them. So with that in mind, gentlemen, what is your verdict? And Nick, I do want to start with you because I know Juice has an elaborate, some of his plans with the Z to lay out for us when it's all said and done of, kind of future state looking stuff as well. But what is your verdict right now with this Cubs team? And by verdict, I mean, this can be, hey, X, Y, Z have to happen for X result. Where do you see this thing playing out now as we have really, we are a full week in the month of July now. So we can have these conversations, especially knowing that there's going to be a 4-day stretch where they don't play any baseball in, less than a week now. What's your verdict for this Cubs team right now?
Yeah, obviously this team has been extremely disappointing. And if you look back to last year, the same type of thing happened where they had to basically play as hard as they possibly could in order to avoid being a hard sell. And me and Juice even had a conversation last year, I think about this time, where we said, like, most likely it is going to be a sell, most likely a soft sell. And then they did go on a run and they did make us like, okay. And that might have been the wrong thing at the time. So this time, I think they need to look at this as what it is. This team is a bad team. You can't look at this and go any other direction. You have to, like you said, you have so many holes that you have to sell. You're at the point where you need to look towards lottery tickets rather than these guys that just can't perform consistently. We've seen it. A lot of these guys just can't do it. So that's where I'm at. Unless they go on an absolute God run, which they won't. That I'm confident in saying this Cubs team is not built to go on a run. And even if they did and they bought, I still don't think that they'd be able to compete with any of the teams in the wild card, like that they'd have to jump. They have to jump 8 other teams or so. So it's a far out there. And as Juice said, I'm pretty optimistic for next year.
Juice, what's your verdict?
I'm just I'm a sick human being, and that's why I'm optimistic in a lot of ways. How you get to a point where this is competitive again is going to be a matter of a couple of things. One of which that I don't think is being talked about enough is the fact that Jed Hoyer is here through 2025. That's when his contract runs till. Do you allow him to be here next year? Is that something that you think about maybe moving on from? Also, too, you got to start to evaluate Carter Hawkins as well. What does Carter bring to this? We don't know these things because we're not in that room. And I think that's why it's so difficult to sit here and go, do this, do this, do this, do this. I don't think it's possible to sit here and go, this is the route that they need to take, because I think first you have to figure out, is Jed Hoyer getting an extension? And if so, what has Jed learned over the course of these last couple years on building a team that he can't do again? And in my opinion, a lot of it is cheaping out on the bullpen. I mean, to only add Hector Neris last year and expect guys like Yancy Almonte, and we've talked about it at length on this show, bullpens are never the same. Each and every single year, it's a different swapping in and out of arms that work, arms that don't. And it's all about creating depth. And the problem that I've had with Jed is he's created a lot of starting pitching depth and then thought that's going to transition into bullpen help. It doesn't always work that way. Some guys are just not wired to come in the 7th and 8th and be immediately locked in. So you got to figure that out. I'm also optimistic because if you look at the Cubs' record over the course of just playing 7-inning games, they're a pretty good baseball team in terms of that. They win baseball games if the game's ended in the 7th inning. Now, going out and spending a little bit on a closer and maybe another setup man and bringing some guys in, yeah, maybe that helps. But the main issue with this lineup is when you look at the way it's constructed with guys who don't hit upper fastballs. It is so frustrating to watch all these guys and the way that these opposing pitchers are working. It's low and away, back to the high fastball. And you watch guys like Belly, like Christopher Morel, like Ian Happ, like Nico Horner, like Dansby, who seems to swing at everything now. They don't catch up to him. And I mean, the book on Dansby was that's what he likes. He likes fastballs. He likes high fastballs. He likes the fastball anywhere in the zone. But the problem is that there's just too many like hitters on this roster. They need to figure out a way to add some diversification within the lineup. Guys who need to be pitched differently. Because I felt like over the course of the 16 team, that was the same problem. It was a lot of – but it was different. It wasn't high fastballs. It was – they were so picky on what they swung at that they got themselves out a lot of times. They got themselves in the bad hitters counts. Now it's like to watch them over and over and over again be pitched the same way and not adjust, to me, that's on some of the hitting coach, and it's on some of these guys too, like to make adjustments. And that's why my verdict is I think they should buy and sell. I think that there's parts of this lineup that they should trade out and find a suitor for. But I also think that if there's a great hitter that is on the market and you truly think that that's a piece that's going to make you better and get you closer to winning a championship within the next couple of years, you need to go out and do it. Because as we've learned in the past, free agency is not definite. Just because we wanted a guy here in Cubby Blue doesn't mean that person wants to be here. And it also doesn't mean that it fits within your budget. So as we sit here today, it's like, first of all, I need to figure out if Jed Hoyer is going to be here, because having him make decisions next year is maybe something that's not, maybe it's not a healthy relationship for what's going on in here. I don't know who you would go out and maybe look at, but the problem is that their lineup just isn't diversified enough, and then their bullpen comes in and there's no depth to it. I mean, we're talking about guys who are in Double A, who are throwing innings now at the back end of this. That's not sustainable. So I still think that there's a route to fixing this thing quickly, but it's going to take some figuring out from the front office standpoint of first, what does the team want to look like? And then they need to figure out which way they're going to go this trade deadline, because it's got to start now. It can't start in the offseason when everybody's looking for help. It's got to start now. At least you've eliminated some of the teams like the Marlins. Like, you're looking at the White Sox. There's teams to be picked on now and picked over. And just because that you're 7 under doesn't mean that you can't add a bat and try to get at least a little better to where maybe you add a 3-hitter, right? This trade deadline, and you trade some of this prospect capital that you don't like. And then maybe in the offseason you add that 4-hitter, and then look at your lineup after that with guys like maybe surrounded by Ian Happ, and maybe a rebound season from Dansby, or if Nico Horner's still on this roster. Like, I like the pieces of this. It's just too many of the same pieces. Like, we need some different recipe. We need more ingredients to the recipe. It can't just be 5 different types of mayonnaise. Like, it's got to be, we got to add like some meat in this sandwich.
Oh, there's the food analogy that I've been waiting for I feel like weeks now. And Juice, I think you're right, and I think a lot of our loyal listeners that are commenting along with us feel the same way. Darren said this a little bit earlier. He said as bad as the run production and all offensive facets of the team have been, if a legit bullpen was in place from day one, they would be holding a wild card spot right now. You mentioned, right, the would-be record after 7 innings of games. I mean, they would be a playoff team right now for sure, just given the number of games that they've blown because of how the bullpens have gone. Brandon B said this a little bit earlier. He said, how do you get rid of Dansby? Could he be the ignite that you're looking for? But again, right, you talk about guys that they need to go and do things. Darren followed it up saying that you're 100% on, Juice, with the not hitting the high fastball theory. He said when they got Dansby, he was one of the best in baseball at hitting that late inning, hard throwing reliever. And for some reason, he has lost that. He's just looked lost in general, right, at the plate. So, there's more and more that are here. Like Matthew says, they won't go on a run because they need that slug. And Juice, I like your theory. I really do, because I think now is a great time that if baseball's trade deadline is going to change with the deadline. And what I mean by that is, historically it was always the only people that made moves were buyers and sellers, right? The hard sellers would sell to the buyers. The hard buyers would buy to go on a run. And that was it. That was all it was every single year. But now, because of the new wild card format, there are going to be a lot more teams that are a little more hesitant on being super aggressive buyers or super aggressive sellers. So to your point, Juice, how do you change that? Well, you kind of do both. Hey, we know X, Y, and Z guys probably aren't going to be here next year. Let's try and move them, and maybe you do get a couple of prospects. Maybe you got a guy that is closer to MLB ready, but he's blocked, like a Michael Busch, right? You get maybe 1 or 2 of those guys. And then you take some of that prospect capital that you have, and you turn around and you go buy a guy or 2 that you can, put in your lineup now and say, you're going to be a huge part of this for the next 2 or 3 seasons. And I think it's going to take somebody to start that trend in baseball at the trade deadline. Why not it be the Cubs, right? Like, why not it be a team that very clearly does need some differences to happen here and to change things around and to make things maneuver. And Nick, I kind of want to start with you on this because I want to pick your brain. And Juice, I'm going to have the same question for you as well. Like, who are some of these guys that if you were Jed right now, like, who are you going out and at least giving a call on and saying, hey, we've identified this guy as a guy that could be here for the next few years. And this doesn't have to be necessarily from hard sellers. This can be from teams that are in kind of the same middle and ground as the Cubs, which is what, 90% of the league, it feels like right now. Who are you calling and saying, hey, let's make a trade for X guy? Who's your guy right now, Nick?
Yeah, well, you need a big thumper. That's what this lineup is lacking is a big thumper and a guy that you just look at and you go, I don't want to face him. I want him to not beat me. We need a guy like that. This lineup is very mid. That is just like the word you have to put it. It's mid. And when you have like you said, when you have that so many the same type of guys, you get lost in translation there. So I would be targeting the big hitters. Alonso's one that I've always wanted to see him in a Wrigley, at Wrigley. He loves hitting at Wrigley. You need a guy like that. So that's one guy that I could see potentially them doing something with. And then if you're looking at like the middling teams, I guess I'm trying to think of some because you want to target power. I think if you're going to buy, like Juice's theory with selling and buying is great, and when you're buying, I want to see them buy power. So they gotta, like you said, they have to see where they're lacking and then try to get the power in that lineup. So there's gonna be a lot of different people out there, but Alonso is just one that I think is the surefire, and that's something that we haven't done is just go with the surefire move. That's one guy that I think you're going to get home runs out of him, and that's exactly what you need.
I dig it. I dig it. Juice, who's the guy that you're targeting?
Yeah, I think first you need to identify who their agents are. I mean, like I love Alonso, but that's a Scott Boras client, and that guy is hitting free agency. There's no way he's not. There is going to be some type of. I love Scott's idea in the comments. I like Brian De La Cruz a lot. I think that's an interesting name. Today it released that Jazz Chisholm is getting pissed off at the Miami Marlins. That's an interesting name because if you're going to buy, you're going to need to trade something of value. And I'm not going to sit here and say that like I've given up on PCA. I like him a lot, but that's the value that teams are going to ask. So if you are able to maybe kind of have and I'm going to pull back an old trade here, like a Christian Yelich kind of trade where you kind of fleece Miami because they've historically been a bad front office and a bad organization. And then you have the ability to then have flexibility within what PCA can bring you back to help you. Maybe it's, another thumper, or maybe he sits within your organization and is that trade bait. Another guy too that I've always been so high on, and the leader of the fan club, Kevin Alcantara. I love him, but he's getting to the point too where he's running out of option years. So you're looking at 2 years until you have to make a decision on him. So maybe that moves his timeline up because he's kind of struggled in AA. So, excuse me. So it's interesting to sit here and talk about like who would you trade for? I think the 4 is not as important as what you're leaving here. Meaning that you need to figure out which of the 5, and I know Hank loved my mayonnaise reference within the comments. You need to figure out which mayonnaise groups are staying. And then you need to trade those mayonnaise for some meat. And I mean, the 5 are the same 5 we're going to talk about over the course of this whole show. It's Dansby, it's Bellinger, it's Nico Horner, it's Happ, and it's Christopher Morel. Those are the 5. You got to figure out which ones you're moving in and out of this lineup because they're so damn similar. That's the problem. And I love building lineups like this when they have diversification. Like we should have seen this coming. 100%. It's on us at Cubs on Tap for not seeing it. It's the second mistake that this Jed Hoyer realm has made and the first one was made with Theo. Too many hitters is not a recipe for success. I think too, you got to look at teams like Houston. You got to look at teams like I brought one up in the chat earlier about, the Twins needing some starting pitching. I think they're 23rd in the league in team ERA. They could use a guy like Jameson Taillon. Maybe you're bringing back a young arm that is a guy that you could see as early as next year and take, some point within the starting rotation, or those are the moves that you need to make, and you need to win on them quick, because just like the Cubs organization is so funny to sit here and look at, because if you look at the team lineup, you would say, I do not see a superstar in this lineup, right? You wouldn't see a guy that like you walk out there like, man, I do not like, I do not want to face that guy. You know what? The same thing happens when you look at their minor league system. It's pretty close to the same. Minus Shaw and Ballesteros, who Ballesteros doesn't have a position. We need to remember. We all need to remember that he's a DH. He cannot play first, and there's a lot of questions on if he can even catch. They need to add their Jose Ramirez. Like I wish Cleveland was bad, because I would sit there and offer everything for that guy. That he solves so many problems for you, but they need that guy. Where's our Jose Ramirez? And I don't care I don't care where they get it from. But I mean, you got to look at all these teams at the bottom and go, I have better prospects than any of these contending teams are going to offer for you, because I have more depth. And you have to say, listen, because of that, I can offer you two really good guys to jumpstart your rebuild. Because if you're looking at teams like the Rockies and the White Sox and the Marlins, to them, depth and amount of prospects is probably going to be more important than that one guy. Because trading an asset, they're going to be looking to get 4 or 5 guys back in that.
100%. No, and I think an incredible point a little bit earlier, Matthew said Alonso, and I like some of Matthew's comments. It's just because I appreciate the passion. He said, Alonso gives you 40 to 50 every year. Sign him. What the fuck? Who cares about PCA? Just do it. He's done. Scott's comment I'll come back to here in a second, because I think that's an interesting follow-up to a bit. Darren said here, he said he has renewed faith in a guy like PCA. He thinks using Tauchman as a platoon mentor piece would finish PCA to a top player. Honest to God, if I could have Tauchman's offensive ability with PCA's explosiveness as a baseball player, that's like the perfect ball player that PCA.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
Like,
he may get there.
Be like an 820 OPS guy and like hit triples and doubles and play Gold Glove defense. That would be phenomenal if that ended up happening. Matthew says, don't trade starting pitching to get offense. Sometimes you have to trade starting pitching to get offense. That's just the nature of the beast. That's where they're deepest, right? That's where they can move some of those assets. And Matthew also said that buy a superstar, Rick. And yeah, I mean, some of the guys that I'm thinking about right now on this topic here, you mentioned Jazz Chisholm as well as De La Cruz. Just some stats for those that are interested and maybe don't want to look them up. De La Cruz currently slashing 237, 286, 410, but he does have 15 home runs and 16 doubles. So there is some thump in his game. Jazz Chisholm actually having a really good offensive season. He's slashing 255, 326, 407. He's got 10 bombs and 40 driven in 87 games. So Jazz Chisholm has actually been a very good baseball player this year.
He's a 107 WRC plus too, right? Or
I think so. I think he was pretty close to that. Yeah, he was above it. I know De La Cruz was below it. De La Cruz was like a 91. Yeah. But two of the guys that I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of looking at, and I think to myself, I go, where do they have the most flexibility in the sense of who's going to play what and do what? And to me, that's third base and first base at the end of the day. I like Michael Busch a lot, and I'm not proposing to get rid of him at all. I feel the same way about Christopher Morel. But what they can both do is those two can move around. If they're not going to be your everyday third baseman, a Michael Busch can play second and first and DH. A guy like Christopher Morel might be a great everyday second baseman instead of being an everyday third baseman because of his athleticism. Maybe that's his ultimate position. Maybe he is best suited as an outfielder someday, and that's just what he plays. We don't know. But what the two guys that I like, especially keeping your thought, you mentioned Juice in terms of the agent, right? Like Pete Alonso is going to go to free agency. You might not be able to retain him unless you completely overpay him, and then you might cap strap yourself and screw yourself. And I know Matthew's banging the drum for Alonso, and I respect that. I think Pete Alonso will be a great player. I just think he's going to want more money than he's worth, in my humble opinion, at this point in his career. The two guys that I really like, one for third base and one for first base. The first base one, we're just going to get out of the way because we've already talked about it at one point in time. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's not represented by Boris. He has different representation. And I know people are like, but he's not slugging this year. I mean, he's slugging 460. He's still an 830 OPS player. That would be by far best on the Chicago
What's
Cubs.
his WRC plus?
He is a
It's gotta be-
135 WRC plus.
I mean, I don't think the Cubs have one hitter above 110 right now.
I don't think they do either. I think Bush is probably the closest, and he's probably about a 110. Maybe Happ now might be up there just because of his recent hot stretch. But
They just
I
don't
mean,
slug enough.
he's been incredible this year. And yeah, maybe he only has 13 bombs so far, but he's driven in 52 runs and he's batting 295. Like, that's something this Cubs team doesn't have either. And he's young enough where you build around him. He's only 25 years old. He's a guy that you can pay for 6, 7, 8 years and he actually be a part of the core. And, Matthew says, Junior's not coming here. Toronto will not be sellers.
These are still conversations for the offseason too, mind you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Vlad Jr. could 100% be one of those,
Available.
baseball meeting trades that we see over the
100%.
course of the year too.
I think Bo Bichette could be as well.
And that's why I sit here and I don't like the Alonso idea, because why would I do that when I know he's going to hit free agency? If I really want him, I can go and get him later.
Pay him in the offseason, right? Don't give up capital to go get him. Just give up dollars. I agree.
Because the Cubs aren't going anywhere this year anyway.
Sure. And I think, look at Bichette, right? I think there's a chance Bichette. I think Toronto is in a very similar position that the Cubs are right now. They have an identity crisis. They need to figure out who is truly a part of their future and who isn't. And in fairness to the Blue Jays, they don't have a farm like the Cubs do to wheel and deal and make some of these moves. Their best trade chips are Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette. Like, that's just the nature of the beast right now. So he's one of the guys I have. The other guy, ironically, was a Cubs prospect once upon a wee long time ago. And he's been traded a few times and he's been moved around. Started in Detroit. Now he's in Tampa. Isaac Paredes has been really fucking good in Tampa the last 3 years and is very much still young enough to be worth a shit. He's only 25 years old. I mean, he has played a lot of really good baseball these last 3 years. His first year in Tampa was a little rough in terms of just the overall batting average. Only batted 205, but was still a 740 OPS player and was a 113 OPS plus. You factor in that his year 2, he hit 31 bombs and 98 driven in. He was an 840 OPS, a 132 OPS plus. And now this year, he's even better than that. He's an 820 OPS, so his total OPS is a little bit down.
It scares me trading with them, though.
He's a 134 OPS plus. And I understand that. I agree, right? You could sit here and say, like, oh, the Rays, they screw everybody, but have they screwed everybody recently? They really haven't. This Rays front office has not done the same wonders that they did with Friedman and then immediately following Friedman's departure. They've kind of gotten a little bit away from that. Look at Randy Arozarena. We all thought they fleeced the Cardinals for Arozarena. Now Arozarena might be on the trade block 2 seasons later, and he doesn't even have the value that he once had.
I still think he's going to be a pretty decent player, though. I think it's the same conversation that you could have with like Dansby Swanson here. I don't think Dansby Swanson's going to ever be this bad ever again. Maybe he will. Don't quote me, and I hope he's not. But these guys have bad years. They really do. And I think like now's the time. Another guy too that I think we haven't mentioned that would be like a decent rental. I don't think you'd have to give up too much. Christian Walker, if you're looking at first base, it's not a bad move. If you were going to go for it, because I think what the Diamondbacks are how many under 500 right now? They're not playing very well.
The Diamondbacks are at 500 right now.
They're at 500. Okay.
They've gone 6-4 in their last 10, and they're winners of 2 straight.
But are they way out of the division though?
The division, yes. The wild card.
Yeah, they're wild card. Well, obviously everybody's in the wild card. We're even still in the wild card.
They're the first team out of the wild card. Yeah.
Okay.
And in the
they're
division,
probably not moving. They're probably adding them.
Yeah, in the division, they're 9.5 out from the Dodgers. So they're not totally out of it.
Not totally out of it.
But unfortunately for that division, unless you are the Dodgers, I mean, even the Padres, who are in second place in that division, are still
here's another good
games out.
Here's another good name, Ron.
Shea
That would solve a lot of problems at catcher. It really would. And honestly, too, if you look up and down this system, there ain't nobody coming to save this. The Cubs are going to have to make a move, either financially with money in the offseason on a catcher, or they're going to have to trade capital for a catcher. And why not Shea Langoliers? He's a very good player. I also, Matt had a really great comment back then that we kind of glossed over a little bit, talking about playing Bush at third. Yes, playing Bush at third. We talked about this in the group chat. I think that a lot of this second half, barring this huge bounce back run that the Cubs make on, you're going to see, I want to see guys like Bush play at third. I want to see if he can do it. I want to see, they've talked so much about Christopher Morel at first. See if he can play there. It's just another position he can notch on his utility belt. I mean, there's going to be a lot of moving around the diamond that I think is going to be interesting in the second half if they've truly kind of waved the white flag. But, I mean, there's a lot of great names out there that I think the Cubs should at least try. I mean, that's the other thing, too. Going into next year, having the most amount of cap that they can, because it is such a talented free agent class this year, is another thing that I think Jed needs to kind of, figure out a way to do. You got to figure out how to slash as much cap as you can, even barring the fact that, that there is a lot coming off. You have Smiley. The understanding, if they do trade guys off and kind of wave the way, Belly is gone. They are going to trade Cody Bellinger. So that $20 million is not on the books for, the next 27 or whatever it is isn't on the books for the next couple of years. So, and two, you get out of the Jamison Tyone contract in some ways, and then you're able to, reset that. There's a lot of money that could come off by just, being the guy that just trades for anything to bring back. I mean, honestly, too, it wouldn't upset me if they traded starting pitching this year for bullpen help for next year. Think about if you have so many guys that are going to need some run in the second half. Give Ben Brown and Wisniewski all the starts they can, roll with Kyle Hendricks, and then keep Shota and Steele, and keep Assad, and then just trade JMO for bullpen help. I wouldn't mind it.
Yeah, I agree. A couple of other additional comments. Darren said this. He said, for now, play Bush at first daily. Hits lefties and few at-bats versus them, but wisdom is not the future. I agree with the wisdom not being the future part. But I'm in support of what you had to say, Juice, right? If you got to move these guys around the diamond, move them. But I agree. I think Bush needs to be in the lineup every single day. Because right now, I got the OPS pluses up for you, Juice, here. I got them ready for you. I know you're chomping at the bit. Michael Bush leads his team at OPS plus.
At what?
128.
We need more 130.
Yes.
We have too much 100. And I'm sure you're about to name a bunch of 100 or 90.
No, well, so there's two guys on the active roster that are above a 120 OPS plus.
4 guys.
Two
guys. Okay.
There's 2.
Sorry.
It's Michael Bush and it's Ian Happ.
Okay.
They're your 2 best hitters right now on this team. And I largely feel that same way as well. I absolutely think those 2 are worth. I think Happ is worth keeping. I truly do. I might be one of the few in that camp. I think he's one of the guys that should stay. I think he's very much found a home in that 5 spot in the lineup. I know we joke he's not a 3 hitter, he's not a 1 hitter. Where the fuck you put him? I think he's found a home in that 5 hole, and I think he's since really thrived there ever since Council put him there and left him there for a while.
So he's Hellman's. He's our Hellman's mayonnaise.
Yeah, he's the good stuff. The good stuff, gabagool. But you go from there the rest of the way. Seiya Suzuki, a 119 OPS plus. Mike Talkman is a 109 OPS plus. And then Cody Bellinger is a 106 OPS plus. And that's it. Everybody else is below 100 on this team.
And you're paying all of that to Cody Bellinger for 106.
Yep.
That is just
Are you ready for some more names for you? I got more names for you.
It's gonna get gross. Who's
Oh,
at the
it
bottom?
is.
Who's at
It
the
is going to get
bottom?
gross.
Miguel Maya.
No. We'll get there. So David Bodie is a 99. Lovely.
Not enough to
Nico
really.
Nico Horner is an 89. Christopher Morel is an 88. Patrick Wisdom's a 76. Dansby Swanson's a 74. PCA is a 52. Miguel Amaya is a 48. Miles Mastroboni's a 14. Thomas Nito is a -5. And in terms of guys that have actually gotten run at the major league level this year, Luis Vasquez is by far the worst at a -100, but that's because he's 0 for 1 with a strikeout. So that doesn't count. But I mean, that's what you're talking about in terms of
That's
guys.
a great
that have been
question
up.
that I'm going to answer to myself later. I'm going to look up how many actual players within the MLB are at a negative number with more than 10 at bats. It can't be many. You know how hard it is to be a negative number in OPS plus?
It's bad.
And you know how like to be a -5,
It's hard.
that's difficult.
Physically hard. Yeah, physically hard to do.
Like you have to try to do that almost.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hank with a good comment here, and I saw a lot of run on this throughout the course of the week with the All-Star stuff coming around because Pete Alonso didn't make the All-Star team. Bush is actually having a statistically better season than Alonso almost every single category except for slump.
Yeah.
Like he has been really, really good. Like I don't think enough people are talking about how good Michael Bush has been this season. Truly. Like I'm not even saying that to sit here and blow smoke up the guy's ass. Like if there's one win that Jed Hoyer can, or I'll say 2 wins that Hoyer can really take from this past off season, it's getting Michael Bush for a lottery ticket effectively in Jackson Ferris and Choga. Like those are the 2 wins for this team right now.
Don't knock Yency Almonte. Before he got hurt, he was fantastic.
He was good, but he was a part of that Michael Bush trade.
I know,
you can
that's
make
what
the
I'm saying.
argument
Like
that the whole trade in general was a huge win for the Cubs.
To just say Bush in there and not add Yency Almonte in there is just it's a crime.
Yency's done for the year now, so we don't get to see anymore.
Well, I mean, my big Yency Almonte fan.
You are a big Yency guy, and I respect that. But that's just kind of what it is here, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. Scott with one more good old contract note here as well. He says only 7 players have guaranteed contracts, 1 mutual, 2 club options, totaling 164 million is what you're looking at for next year. Yeah, there's not a lot of money. Not a lot of money coming in the books.
So you're realistically looking at like doing the math in my head. What 100 and they'd have give or take 110 before, and
one of those is Belly. The player option is Belly,
and they're going to trade that.
Yeah.
So
Bodie comes off the books. That's another $7 million you avoid next year. Hendricks comes off the books at 16.5.
Smiley's 9.
Smiley's 11.
They're 11. Yeah, even worse.
Or actually, I'm sorry. I think he's 10.5 technically, but still a lot of money regardless.
I love how Nick is just laughing at all the bad.
It's horrible. I'm just in shock. Honestly, I'm just in shock. It's July 8th, and we're just in horrible.
That is fair. That is totally fair.
It's laughable how bad they are.
I will give you, boys, here we go. I can look at 2025 payroll. Here we go. Yeah, so Scott was pulling the 164. 164,250 is all that's guaranteed under contract for next year. But that is also including Belly, Smiley, Neris, and Bodie. So if you subtract all of that, I can't do rough math very quickly. That's 26 knocked off of 64. So that puts you, in the high 120s? And then you knock Belly off. I mean, that almost puts you at $100 million.
Yeah, that's why I was sitting.
And obviously, you got arbitration guys and everything that's going to elevate that a little bit. It's probably going to come out to about 125 million.
Yeah, so give or take, and then honestly too, we were looking at the levels too are going to raise. It was on 234, I thought, last year. They were looking at another $10 million to the first level of tax. So
Yes.
you're looking at another 10 that's going to be built into there
Before you hit the luxury tax thresholds, right? So I mean that's a lot of money to play with, but they need to go to actually do something with it and be productive.
It also
with
kind of
that.
helps my theory of like, if there were ever a great chance to hand it over to anybody else, now's the time, because if Jed Hoyer is his last year is 2025, you want to have the next GM come in here with the most playable cap money they can, or
Yeah.
Jed's the guy and you're extending him. Like
It's one of the two.
that's the bigger conversation that needs to be had. I mean, we're going to sit here and talk about what they need to do, but we need to figure out who's doing the doing.
True.
Who's doing the doing? Quick little news update. This is as of about 10 minutes ago for those that are curious. It's just pitching. Who's pitching this series coming up? The Cubs are going to go with Tyone, Shota, and Steele for the next 3 in Baltimore.
Yeah, show Tyone. Show Tyone. Show them to everybody.
So that is exactly where things are going to go from here. So that'll be your matchups. And I think with that in mind, we will look ahead because we are at about the hour mark, gentlemen. Next up on the slate is the Baltimore Orioles. It's a 3-game set with Baltimore. All 3 games are 5:35 Central Time. So because of that, unfortunately, no watch-alongs from us this week. Just it's too early in the day. That really screws a lot of schedules when it comes to doing a full watch-along. So our goal and intention is to reboot those. However, those have not fully gone away. We originally took them away to try and change the tide. And when we realized the tide wasn't going to change, we realized it wasn't our fault. Let's just put it that way. But nonetheless, those will come back once the All-Star break comes and goes. So be thinking that Milwaukee series and then that subsequent Red series to finish out the month of July is when you'll hear back from us on the watch-alongs. But for this 3-game set, it will be Tyone versus Dean Kremer on Tuesday. It will be Shota versus Corbin Burns on Wednesday. That'll be a hell of a pitching matchup for those that like good pitching. And then Thursday with Albert Suarez on the mound for the O's, it will be Justin Steele. So that is the 3 pitching matchups for this series. Guys, I'm not going to ask you what do they need to do to win the series, because I think at this point it's probably not going to happen. What is your prediction, I guess, is what I should say for this series? What are you expecting? Are the Cubs going to get the doors blown off? Are they going to win 1 out of these 3? Are they going to win 2 out of 3? What happens? Just give me your best prediction of what's going to happen over the next 3 games.
1 out of 3.
1 out of 3? Okay.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen. They're going to take all 3, get us all excited, and then they're going to lose all 4 against Cardinals.
Could happen.
Because this is what this team does. This team it's one of the dumbest teams in Cubs baseball history. It is. They play stupid baseball.
They do play dumb baseball. It's wild. It's wild. Scott says here, Cubs might score more runs in the first game than games 2 and 3 combined against the Orioles. Yeah, Albert Suarez, for those that don't know, has a 2.48 ERA. He's been very, very good for the O's. Obviously, Burns has been really good. He's got a 2.32 ERA. And even Kremer's been good. He's got a sub-4 ERA, 3.93 is what he's working with coming into this series against the old Cubbies. I think they're going to win 1 out of 3. And I think these games are going to be a little closer than they expect, just because I think they're going to, especially the last 2, I think are going to be pitching duels, truly. I don't think they're going to, the over-under combined is probably going to be less than 7 for both of those games, is my guess. I think if there's any game that's going to be a little bit of a slugfest, it's Tuesday. But even JMO's been pitching really well. So it's like, how do you sit here and say that one's going to for sure go that way? So very intrigued to see what happens. I will say one thing about the series, though, in terms of what Cubs fans can hope for. Hope for a team like the Baltimore Orioles. They're young. They're fun. They've got money to spend. You know, they seem to be largely willing to be aggressive now at this point in their turnaround. Really happy for Brandon Hyde, former Cubs former Cubs coach. Really went through a lot of shit as their manager for those first few years when they were really, really bad. Now he's got a good team, and he's largely putting them in the right direction. So huge kudos and really, really happy for him.
He the favorite for manager of the year?
He's got to be. Didn't he win it last year?
Did he?
I think he did.
I thought he did.
Might have.
I think he did. I think he won AL Manager of the Year last year, and I think he's absolutely in line to do it again if Baltimore continues to do what they're doing.
He did win it last year. You're right.
I mean, shit. Let me pull up the friggin' standings here again really quick because I don't pay attention to the AL as much. Yeah, they're the best team in the AL, so I mean he should be in the conversation for it once again. They've been incredible. So I will say that is one thing. There you go. I think that's something that we could appreciate about the series coming up. And again, hope that the Cubs can become a team like the Orioles, young, have your stars in place, right? Guys like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson's been a stud. They have those guys in place with more coming. Hoping the Cubs can get to that point with some of these guys, maybe have a couple of developmental success stories, right? We're largely still waiting for this farm system that's supposed to be so fucking good to actually develop a guy who's worth a shit on the everyday roster, or trade those pieces to go get that guy, right? They got to do something when it's all said and done. A really funny comment here from Hank, though, that I do want to share. Jed going to have, quote, stayed under the luxury tax inscribed on his tombstone in relation to our discussion of what we were just talking about. Gentlemen, before we get out of here, I do want to remind everybody.
Plus 850, real quick. Plus 850.
For what?
For AL Manager of the Year for Brandon Hyde.
Put 850?
Plus 850.
Is that the best odds?
No. Kansas City Royals, Matt Cuarto.
Oh, because of their turnaround. I can see that
Stephen
happening.
Voigt, too, up there as well. Also, Stephen Voigt, the manager
Guardians,
for
right.
Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland's been really good. That's
real quick. How awesome is it to be a Cleveland fan right now? You have the number one pick and you're leading your division. Got to be easy to be a Guardians fan right now.
Isn't that bonkers?
Yeah, and everybody thought they were going to be bad.
It's we'll have to wait and see. Matthew with a quick departing comment, it says we will be buyers, bet on it. Jed won't give in. Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. We are not done. You will obviously hear from us plenty before the trade deadline is done. A little preview of what's to come. Thursday night we'll be live again after the Baltimore series. We'll be recapping that 3-game stretch, and then we will be back with you following the Cardinal series. We'll talk obviously a little bit about the Cardinal series, but that will be the All-Star break show, which is probably one of the more fun shows here at Cubs on Tap. That's a long one, so I highly recommend you bring a couple 2-3 cold ones with you to sit down and watch our show that night. It's gonna be a long one, and I'm also hoping we have a full barn. That is the goal. A full co-host panel of all 5 of us. Maybe even Bobby Foster might join us. There's rumors and rumblings of that being a possibility. Nonetheless, there will be a full group. We'll have a lot to talk about. There's a good chance I might. I kind of want to leave it for the end of the year, but I think this year has gone so south that bringing up some of the early season predictions might be kind of fun on that show. Quite honestly, I don't know how that's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. Then we'll be back with you after for that Diamondback series and obviously every series that leads into the trade deadline. So don't worry, you will hear plenty of this discussion from us over the next month or so right here as well. Gentlemen, as always, I'm going to remind everybody, Cubs on Tap is one of 2 official Cubs podcasts here on the On Tap Sports Network. Check out our friends over at the Dingers Podcast. They will be live tomorrow night here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out. I talked to them a little bit earlier, so they're running tomorrow. So you get back-to-back days of Cubs content right here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit the bell button. You know the drill, and you will know when all of our shows go live. Follow them at Digger Cubs. Follow us at Cubbies on Tap. Follow all the boys as well. Luce on Tap, Juice on Tap, Nick _ on Tap, Joey Knows Nothing, Teddy Freddy 270 at Silent Bob _2. Be sure to give all the boys some love. And at Bulls Guy Rob Rugley, back for the summer. He's going to be writing up some prospect content. He'll, I know for sure, probably be helping me with the MLB draft, which is coming up as a part of All-Star Weekend and as part of the All-Star break. So do be on the lookout for that as well. As always, we got it all. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks. Blackhawks were busy. I had a great time not paying attention to Cubs baseball for a few days. The Bulls guys, a little quieter, but they're still making moves. DeMar, the latest move, he's now a Sacramento King as a result. So be sure to look out on the lookout for that content as well. And the Bears guys, this weekend I think is the last official weekend without any type of NFL football because training camps start to open the following week. It's going to get exciting here in Chicago, so be sure to follow the Bears on Tap crew. And as always, Cubs fans, I know we're down bad. You got friends that are probably even more down bad than we are. Send your friends to our friends. They'll be friends over at Sox on Tap, on tapsportsnet.com, and on Tap Sportsnet on the socials, the On Tap Sportsnet. Go check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Gentlemen, this was fun. I'm glad I got to see both of you guys. Darren says here, he says, good shows as always, guys. Kidney stones suck. Get better juice. I will second and echo that as well. And again, we will be back following this Baltimore series. 3 games coming up with the O's on the East Coast. Until then, we're going to get out of here. We love y'all as well. Thank you, Matthew. And what do you say, boys? We got to know how it Cubs on tap.
Fuck the Cubs.
Fuck the Cardinals.
And let's go Cubbies, I think.